Like all great origin stories, this story tells the journey of a young boy who, through great adversity, rose above his struggles and became a real world hero. In the late summer of 1995, Crystal and Rick Richard gave birth to their first and only child, Maurice Richard. Shortly after having their first child, the two decided to move to Jacksonville, Florida. Previously, the couple had been living up north, but decided to move once Rick received a promotion at work. You see, ever since Rick was a young boy, he dreamed of one day working for NASA. He was fascinated by rockets, shuttles, and just about everything involving space. When the opportunity was finally presented, he knew it was something he couldn't pass up. It was the perfect opportunity to help support his family and a way to fulfill a childhood dream. Once the Richards arrived in Jacksonville, they settled into their new town. Rick worked at the nearby Kennedy Space Center, and Crystal found work at a local beauty salon. As the years went on and Maurice got older, Rick and Crystal's work life seemed to overtake their home life, leaving Maurice alone for long periods of time and leaving him to essentially raise himself. School and social life also didn't treat Maurice well, as he was constantly bullied for being small and weak, something Maurice was always self conscious about. Due to this, Maurice really didn't have many friends, and by that, I mean he didn't have any. He spent most days going through the motions of school and enduring constant harassment and abuse. To make matters worse, his parents were seldomly home, leaving him no one to open up to or to seek help from. Things weren't all bad for Maurice, though. He often found joy in hockey, a game his father used to play, and a game his father introduced him to. Hockey was more than a game for Maurice. It was a way to escape from the world, a way to spend time with his father, and a way to finally be happy. During the seldom times Rick was home, Maurice and him would spend it watching and playing hockey. It was the one time Maurice felt connected to his father and was truly happy. Around the age of 7, Maurice began asking his father about playing on a real hockey team. Maurice thought this would make his father proud and would thereby make his father spend more time with him. Rick was overjoyed that his son wanted to play hockey and began looking into local teams. Eventually, Rick found a local team set in Jacksonville, the Rockets, and named to pay homage to the local Kennedy Space Center. His father signed Maurice up, and he would start playing in the fall. The two then spent the months leading up to the season practicing and getting Maurice ready. Playing hockey was great for Maurice, but just spending time with his father made it all the worthwhile. Once the season started, Maurice was introduced to his new team. As the first few weeks went on, it was apparent Maurice wasn't as skilled as the other players. He had the heart, he had the dedication, but the skill just wasn't there. After only a few weeks on the team, the coach and Rick thought it would be best if Maurice left the team and came back once he had improved. Maurice was devastated. He thought he had blown his only chance at happiness, and worst of all, he thought he let his father down. As the months went by, Maurice found himself in a deep depression. His father saw this and began taking him to special work events, to basically get his mind off of hockey and to get him out of the house. These events were mostly shuttle launches and rocket tests. You see, Rick was in charge of the control room at the facility. He was a pretty big deal around the Kennedy Space Center. Maurice found happiness at these events and enjoyed spending the time with his father. However, seeing the rockets launch would sometimes remind him of his former team, which would often upset Maurice. Seeing this, his father grabbed him, looked him in the eyes, and said, "You're going to go back one day. You're going to play for the Rockets. You're going to star for the Rockets. You're going to be Rocket Richard. One day, you're going to be a star hockey player." Maurice then saw the sincerity and passion in his father's eyes and knew that one day this would be true. He spent the next few days outside constantly practicing, working on his shot, strength, speed. If he could work on it, you could bet he would be practicing it. He was preparing to make his father's words come true. As the new year came, so too did a tragedy. On February 1st, 2003, the Space Shuttle Venus mysteriously crashed in Florida. Debris and parts could be found scattered all over the state, and NASA was doing everything in its power to contain the situation. Due to the freak accident and tight lipped response, many conspiracy theories came about in regards to the flight. One day when Maurice was on his way to school, he came across something in the woods. While he was walking by, he saw something strange, so being the kid he was, he went in to check it out. In the woods, he saw debris from the Venus shuttle that had recently crashed. However, this wasn't normal debris from a shuttle. There was something off about it. It had an odd odor and a glow to it. He began digging through the rubble and found an old device, almost alien like. It was this cube shaped device covered in weird lettering, with a button on the side. Maurice was blown away and fascinated by this. So, being the dumb and naive kid he was, he decided to press the button. Upon pressing it, Maurice's body and mind went completely limp. He awoke several hours later, not knowing what the cube had done. He then rushed home to tell his parents what had happened, but they weren't there. Instead, an officer was parked in his driveway, waiting for him. Instantly, Maurice thought it was about the artifact he had found, and began nervously walking towards the officer. However, this wasn't about the cube. The officer looked down at Maurice and told the boy that there was an accident. Maurice then quickly interrupted, "Yes, I know the Venice incident. It's all over the news." The officer responded, "No, not that accident. Your mother and father, they were in a terrible automobile accident." Maurice, with a pale and blank stare, then asked, "Are they okay?" The officer then, with a single tear rolling down his cheek, shook his head no. Maurice, not knowing what to do, walked inside, laid in his bed, and just laid there looking up. A few days later, Maurice's grandparents flew down to take him back up north, where he would then live and stay with them. Once they arrived up north, Maurice began noticing changes to his body. He was gaining muscle, his reflexes were increased, and he began processing information at an extremely high rate. The cube that he had found had done something to him. It had changed him somehow. Somehow, some way, something was happening with Maurice. Wanting to make his father proud, he asked his grandparents to sign him up for hockey. Maurice then began playing, but this time at an entirely different level. He was a man amongst boys. He was simply incredible. Local papers and news outlets would constantly rave about him, touting him as the next great hockey player. This cube that he found in the woods had changed him and had made him a god amongst boys, a god amongst men. He was the next great hockey player. As his youth years passed and his high school days were coming to an end, many NHL scouts were predicting him to go #1 overall in the upcoming draft. Throughout his playing career, he had accomplished so much, broke records, won awards. Scouts were calling him a prospect like no other. That year, Toronto had the #1 overall pick, and with it, selected Maurice Richard. He then moved up to Toronto and started his NHL career. Throughout that first year, he constantly thought about his family and would often pull out the cube and ask himself, "Do I deserve this? Am I worthy of this success that he had received?" One night, while looking at the cube and laying in bed, Batman came on the TV, and just like that, something clicked. He knew the cube had given him incredible abilities, and the NHL lifestyle had given him an incredible amount of money. Why not use this gift and give back to the world? And like that, a vigilante was born. Maurice would then roam the city of Toronto at night after games looking for anyone who needed his help. He finally came across an elderly woman being cornered by 3 guys with guns. He quickly rushed in, took out the 3 men, and rushed off. The woman, now safe and thankful for this vigilante, yelled out, "Who are you?" Which he then turned and replied, "Rocket. Rocket Richard."